We're the Hidradenitis SuppuraDivas. If you've got HS, you'll want to meet us. It's not your fault, put the shame to a halt. HS divas know how to have a ball. The Hidradenitis SuppuraDivas. Put the shame to a halt, cause it's not your fault.
Alright, what's up you guys? Welcome back to another episode of Hidradenitis SuppuraDivas. I'm so excited that you're here as always. I'm here with Bryn, and as you guys know, being a chronically ill baddie in the workplace is like, they really don't go together, you know what I mean? And so I personally have been, like, I didn't even realize this, I've been a stay-at-home mom for like 4.5 years now. Like, that's actually insane. Bobo just turned 4 in April, and like, since I was pregnant with him, I have not clocked into a job. And what a blessing that is. But because of that blessing, I unfortunately don't even remember, like, I mean, I remember because it was traumatic, but I used to be a CNA, and I went through like so many jobs because I would rather do like a no-call, no-show before I called my boss and was like, I actually have hidradenitis suppurativa, I can't walk today. And I never utilized any resources that are put in the workplace to kind of help people who live with chronic illness or get sick spontaneously or anything like that. But fortunately enough, Brindley has. So we're going to ask her all the questions on how she was able to work a job. For how many years did you work your previous job?
I was in the same industry for 22 years, and I worked at the same place for the same company for 17 of those 22 years.
Literally an angel. Like, I have like 19 previous work histories, so it's fine. So how was your HS journey through like working in that kind of environment and not being your own boss?
So I've had HS since I was 10, so there wasn't a time working that I hadn't had HS. It was definitely difficult. I mean, obviously, at work, I was fortunate enough not to work a really physical job, so everything that I've done has pretty much been in the office. But it's definitely been difficult. I worked really, really hard my entire life to let nobody know about my HS. I was silent about my HS for 17 years, and I realize now that that was such a detriment to myself and to other people, because being silent about it meant that I suffered in silence as well.
Right.
So up until I had wide excision surgery, I had not even told my boss, who I had worked with for those 22 years pretty much, that I had HS. So I would show up to work and be like, my HS will never control what I do, how I show up, all of the things. And so I basically would show up come hell or high water, regardless of the state of my flares, regardless of what was happening. I owned more cardigans than, HS people probably know. Y'all have closets full of cardigans too, I'm sure. But worked really, really hard to just keep my HS a secret. So I never filed for like FMLA or anything like that, and didn't even really know how those programs worked until I needed them for wide excision surgery. Mm-hmm. But I played, many of the same games that most of us have, like, whose gauze is this on the floor? And then you act disgusted when you pick it up because everyone else around you is disgusted, and the entire time it's your fucking gauze that fell out of your armpit. But you've got to put on that, that role, play that role. Many times where I had to say that I started my period, I was on Marina, I didn't get periods, but according to work, I have periods all the time. All of those kinds of things where you have an extra set of clothing in your desk drawer and you're prepared for an emergency at work, and when you're not because you forgot to replace those clothes, then you had to go home because you had really bad period cramps. So I had all my lies, like I'm sure all of us do, like ready to whip out to cover our own asses, literally and figuratively sometimes. So it was definitely difficult, and I think, in having HS, obviously sitting in a desk was difficult for me, so I started sitting on a donut cushion there as I started to get more accepting of my HS, and of course I didn't tell anybody that was why, I just said that my back was hurting. And then just starting to do things that that made more sense for me as I was moving through that whole process and time. But it was difficult. It was hard for me sitting all the time, living with HS. It wasn't until COVID that I was working from home and realized one of my triggers is mechanical stress, which was sitting, and then jeans. And I was wearing jeans all the time to work. And so as soon as I started wearing joggers, like, life changed dramatically for me. So I'm grateful for that, because I did learn, like, okay, you can do jeans, you can't do them every damn day.
Yeah.
But I think most of us can attest that going to work and dealing with flares is really difficult. And I can't imagine going to work in a job that requires, like, a lot of manual or physical labor, and, like, dealing with flares either in your armpits or in your groin that are extremely painful while you're sweating and you're working really hard physically and all of those things. I think that once you work in an office job, sometimes that can be taken for granted. That yes, it's uncomfortable, but in some ways you can try to make yourself comfortable in your seat. But if you're out doing that kind of manual and physical labor, like, you're pretty much screwed.
Yeah, because it's just, I think about the men living with HS who, unfortunately, that's their reality every single day. And then they have the societal pressure to be, like, the breadwinner, to take care of your entire family. And then it's like, but I hope that you're talking to somebody about your HS to make sure that, like, you're taking care of yourself too. Because often we will put ourselves on the back burner and not take care of ourselves, and in return that makes our HS worse, and it's just a vicious cycle that you constantly see yourself, like, trapped in. So when you were ready to, can you explain a little bit what FMLA is, and, like, is that available to people who work full-time, or what is that?
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt. I just want to talk about something that I think a lot of us in the HS community overlook, which is clinical trials. I know. When you hear clinical trial, your brain probably goes to a lab coat and a clipboard situation. But honestly, it's not like that. Being in a clinical trial is just going to the doctor's office. You're seen by a care team, you have appointments, they're checking in on you. It genuinely feels like some of the best, most attentive medical care you will ever get. And here's what a lot of people don't realize. It's completely covered. You're not paying out of pocket for any of it. And many trials actually help with travel costs too. So getting there isn't on you either. For those of us who've dealt with HS and know how expensive and exhausting this condition can be, that's actually a huge deal. Beyond the personal stuff, every person who enrolls helps us get closer to better treatment options for everyone living with HS, and that matters, because we all know how much we need more treatment options. A big thank you to Moon Lake for sponsoring today's episode and for supporting the HS community in a real and meaningful way. We'll drop a link in the show notes if you want to learn more. All right, now back to it.
Yeah, so FMLA is Family Medical Leave Act, and it's a government program. There are some rules around it as far as, like, I think if your employer has 50 employees or more, or maybe 100 or more employees, then they are required to use FMLA, or, ascribe to FMLA. I think if you work for a smaller company that has fewer employees than that, you're not FMLA eligible, because the employer is not required to carry it. There's a certain threshold. So basically, FMLA is family medical leave, so you can take it for a multitude of reasons. If you have a spouse who is going off to war, or being deployed, there's a special part for that. There's also a part for health issues, or pregnancy and delivery. You can also get FMLA. It is unpaid time off, but sometimes your state will have the same kind of thing, but you're eligible for pay. So you would have to look up under your own state's rules if they have kind of like a paid family leave situation. But FMLA is pretty much put in place to protect your job.
Okay.
So if there's a continuous FMLA, which means you would be off for, like, the 12 weeks that you're eligible for, and you have to have worked a certain amount of time prior to filing for FMLA.
Okay.
So you can't, like, get a brand new job and then be like, oh, I'm going out on FMLA. I think it's like a year before you can actually apply for it. And I'm sure you can find all the details. Google, the best friend. And then there's also, I don't remember exactly what they call it, but more like a spontaneous leave where you need to be gone for doctor's appointments, or you may have like a procedure done that you need like a week off for.
Okay.
So you can put in for either the continuous leave or the more spontaneous leave, depending on what your situation is. So we also did just learn that clinical trials, if you're in a clinical trial, you should be able to use your spontaneous FMLA for clinical trials to hold your job as well, because it's technically considered a doctor's visit.
Yeah.
So that is really amazing, because I know that that's a huge fear for a lot of people, is being able to take that time off. Again, it's unpaid, but it's something to definitely look into. So it just means that you can't be replaced at your job, or that when you come back they have to offer you an equal position.
Okay.
To what you had prior to.
So
don't quote me on all of that,
seriously,
but yes,
just job security.
protection. Yes,
Because how inconvenient to be like, oh, I need to have surgery, gotta take this amount of time off, and then like now you're healing and trying to get better and gotta find a new job. Like that would be a lot of stress and be hard for the average person. So please, if your job is available, if that's available to you, and you know that you can utilize that if you need to, please do that, so that way you're not creating a more stressful environment while you're trying to heal from whatever it is you have going on. So I love that. And you utilized FMLA?
Yeah. And we had, in Washington State, there's paid family leave. So you take, I think the other thing to mention is FMLA paperwork has to be filled out by your physician. It can be somewhat of a stressful process, just because if you're dealing with FMLA, that's typically more easily approved with the physician information on there, but state stuff and state pay for it can be a little bit frustrating to work through depending on your state. So kind of prepare yourself for that. Don't think that like you've enrolled and then it's easy peasy. It's kind of a little bit of a battle, and a lot of states have backlogs. So that's also something to take into consideration. Like we have probably a 4 to 6 week backlog.
Wow.
So in Washington State, for instance, with paid family leave, you have to take your first week unpaid, and then it'll kick in after that, and you get up to a percentage of your income.
Yeah, Josh got that when I had Naomi.
Yeah.
And then it worked out nice for us.
Yeah,
for that
exactly.
time.
So if you also are paying health insurance benefits, ask about that, because if you're paying health insurance benefits through your employer, they may have an opportunity for you to pay that while you're off through what you're making, and not have to come back and have that withdrawn extra from your paycheck. So these are like little tips that I've learned through the process, is like making sure that you're clear with your employer about what the plan is. Is it possible for me to pay for my health insurance out of what I'm getting during my off time, instead of coming back and then finding out that you now have all of that back insurance premium to pay? Because that can be really detrimental to your pay. So those kinds of things, and then just making sure, I think most of them have you apply every week to make sure that that is still valid. You would have to have that same kind of information from your doctor on a different form, of course, because they wouldn't use the FMLA form for your state. This is what I mean, where it gets kind of complicated, but just keeping all your stuff together, calling if you have questions.
Keeping track of your PTO, because that's a great, like, kind of like a quick emergency thing to utilize if you're like flaring and you need to take the day off but you can't take the financial hit. I know my sister would use some PTO, boy. She don't use that shit.
And the good thing with FMLA is I don't think you have to exhaust your PTO.
No,
so like
I don't
you
think
can
so.
keep your PTO and use your FMLA. It doesn't have to be like one or the other.
That's awesome.
Which I think is nice, because I mean, as much as we take extra time off work, y'all, we still deserve vacation time.
Stack that PTO so high, man. I'd be like, it'd be the December, they'd be like, it's not gonna roll over. Sorry, I'm taking the whole month off.
That used to be me. I was like, oh, I haven't taken any time off. Like, oh, let me get all this down on the books. Yeah.
But I think, for one, I know who Brindley is, and her saying that she worked that way while she was flaring is no surprise to me, because I know how her work ethic is, but also mentioned how, like, you don't get a trophy for pretending that your HS doesn't exist to your employer, and then like weathering that storm and nobody knows that you're going through what you're going through. She didn't get a special cookie for that. She got more help and resources when she was like, this is actually what I'm really dealing with. I'm sorry I haven't been on my period for 12 years. Like, I a real skin condition and I need some help and I need this time off. And so shout out to you for recognizing that like the change needed to happen and you needed to talk about it and you got the help that you needed.
Well, and y'all, in reality, seriously, if you died tomorrow, they would replace you and never bat an eye. So I often think to myself now, like, yes, I have great work ethic, but damn, did I push myself way too hard to prove my worth through all of this. It was the stupidest thing in hindsight. I didn't get a trophy. I didn't get a raise. I didn't get anything on, like, I mean, I guess maybe in elementary school you'll get like an award about how many days you missed. You know, you were the best eagle who didn't miss any days. But none of that exists for adults. And so I'm like pissed at myself in some ways that I did not take the opportunity to just do what I needed to do for me because I was so focused on making sure that it was in the best interest of the company. But the best interest of the company, they weren't looking out for the best interest of me. So, I mean, I don't mean to sound like somebody who is hating on your employer at all. I was an excellent employee, which is why I worked for the same company for 17 years. But at the same time, like, damn.
Yeah.
It was so stupid.
And I'm proud that you came to that realization and now you advocate for people to do that same thing and make sure, like, if there's anything that I know with all these, like, warriors who are in the HS crews, like, you care about their well-being and about, like, their emotional and mental state in their HS more than you care about what they can do for you. And sometimes that backfires. But, you know, like, that just goes to show that you took your experiences and you want to make sure nobody else feels that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing that with us on this episode. I believe it's going to help people stop hiding that from their employers and get the help that they need and take the time off that they deserve when they need it, because that is when your body heals the best.
Yes.
When you're resting, when you're listening to it, when you're not in fight or flight mode and survival mode. And so I encourage you that if taking time off from work is what you need and you can utilize FMLA or use a couple PTO days, whatever you need to do. Work can be a really stressful environment, so don't forget to take a couple mental health days for yourself. And it's okay to bed rock or couch rock.
Yes.
Or, honestly, if you want to stay home from work, but then go out and do everything that you can't do on a typical day, go to the bank, go to the grocery store, do the things that you need to do in that one day, so on your actual next day off, you can take that rest for yourself, whatever that looks like for you.
Absolutely.
So thank you guys for tuning in. We hope that it was beneficial to you.